In this particular segment, we'll be dealing with what I wish I knew before I taught Beowulf. As you've already figured out from this series, classical literature is difficult. It can be intimidating. Lots of us have public school educations, didn't have strong encounters with the classical books, and so the idea here is, boy, Beowulf is approachable. We can do this, but there are some things to know that will help us as we tackle this difficult book. So I'd say there's really two reasons to be excited about reading Beowulf. Number one is the reason that Tolkien cites in his critical essay about Beowulf. It's a beautiful poem. It's not quite as epic as the Iliad or the Odyssey, but it is a beautiful epic poem. Tolkien says everyone wants to dismantle this old tower, and nobody notices that from this old tower you can see out to the sea, that it's beautiful, that it's a beautiful thing. And I think first and last we have to say Beowulf is a beautiful poem. We can appreciate it just for its beauty. But secondly, Beowulf reminds us that the darkness hates the light, and that the darkness is constantly trying to snuff out song and joy and light, and that there is this heroic stance that needs to be taken to stand up to those forces of darkness. It's become a cliche to say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, but it's true. It's a cliche because it's true. And if Beowulf doesn't stand in the gap, then the forces of darkness have a much easier time overcoming the Danish people. So, number one, what I wish I knew before teaching Beowulf is that there are lots of good translations out there. Other books, I'm going to argue pretty strongly, you need this particular translation of this particular work, but here, pick up a few different translations, skim them, and ask yourself, what do I feel most comfortable reading? You should know that the Raffel translation is fantastic. Burton Raffel, spelled R-A-F-F-E-L, is the one that I choose to use. Probably more popular than that is the Seamus Heaney translation, and that's also excellent. You can feel free to use that in reading and teaching Beowulf as well. There's an E. Talbot Donaldson translation. Donaldson is wonderful, and if that turns out to be the one that you like, use that translation as well. I will caution you, it's tempting for Christians. There's a Tolkien translation of Beowulf, and as soon as we hear that name, J.R.R. Tolkien, we think, well, that's the one to use. And he did that very early in his career. He never saw fit to publish it. So even though it's tempting, he didn't think it was up to snuff. And I would probably go with one of those other three translations. This is the Beowulf Raffel translation that we use, and it's fantastic and very, very available. So that's an option for you. The second thing that I wish I knew about teaching Beowulf is that it really is about one author. You will read the occasional critic who suggests, oh no, this is a document that has been there's been a lot of collaboration on it over time. Some Christian monks got a hold of it and changed some things. And speaking as someone who loves a good story, when you encounter a voice that can tell you a good story, you don't have questions about whether or not there's a whole bunch of people collaborating on this. The author of Beowulf, whoever he was, and we don't know who he was, whoever he was a gifted, gifted storyteller. And it's really wrong-headed to suggest that a committee wrote Beowulf. There is clearly one man who is responsible for the character of Beowulf, the action of the story, and the strong rhythm of what's going on as well. So don't be deceived by people who tell you otherwise. Also, as we're on the topic of Tolkien, one of the things I wish I knew before I started teaching Beowulf was that J.R.R. Tolkien has an excellent critical essay about Beowulf. It's called Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics. I would strongly recommend picking that up. I know it sounds like I'm giving you more reading instead of less reading, which can be frustrating. But even just hearing Tolkien set up this idea that Beowulf is this quiet masterpiece that demands our attention, I think can galvanize you to teach Beowulf. So do look up, when you get a chance, Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics by Tolkien. And then I wish I knew that I didn't have to believe exclusively what Tolkien has to say about Beowulf. He ultimately draws some conclusions about the theme that I don't think we should draw. So I'm going to quote a couple things from Tolkien here. You can wrestle with them as you read Beowulf. This is really his conclusion about the poem itself. He says, quote, "Defeat is the theme. Triumph over the foes of man's precarious fortress is over, and we approach slowly and reluctantly the inevitable victory of death." And then he goes on to say, in a sense, all Beowulf's first 3,136 lines are the prelude to a dirge. And that sounds pretty depressing. The theme of Beowulf is death and defeat. It's all setting up the burial of Beowulf in the end. And I'm here to suggest that you need to pay attention to the character of Wiglaf as well. So you will read the first half of Beowulf, never encounter this warrior, wonder what's going on. But at the end of Beowulf, Wiglaf will step onto the stage in what I would argue is very much Beowulf's role. That this is someone to whom the mantle is passed by Beowulf. So at least consider, as you're reading this great poem, that it's not just about the conquest of Beowulf by death, that there's this hope that a great hero can hand off to the next generation and find another great hero to wage the battle against death and darkness. I need to say this too, in terms of things you should know about Beowulf. There's no great big divider in the book that says, intermission, this is now a 50-year gap, but that happens between lines 2,199 and line 2,200. In that space, more than 50 years pass. The first story of Beowulf has been told. Beowulf goes home, his king dies, his king's son dies, and then Beowulf takes the throne and rules for over 50 years in that space between the lines. So you're going to take probably a 55, 60 year time jump between those two lines, from the beginning of Beowulf's life in the first half to the end of Beowulf's life in the second half. And unless you're kind of paying attention, that jump can be jarring. Those are the main things I wish I knew before I taught Beowulf. I'm going to get on my hobby horse and say one more thing, and you can take this or leave it. But the Christian church at this time, so Beowulf is approximately 730 AD, written approximately 730 AD. The church is coming to grips with the idea of the underdog. And Beowulf is this strange combination of underdog and overdog. And here's what I mean by that. It is only the Bible that tells stories. Let me say it again. Initially, it's only the Bible that tells stories about the underdog winning. In all ancient literature, it would be foolish for the underdog to win. If you think about Achilles and Hector in the Iliad, Hector resonates with us because he's human and he might not win, but he doesn't resonate with the old readers, with the ancients. With the ancients, they believe Achilles has all the strength and all the power and the best lineage and the best armor because the gods intend him to win. Odysseus has all the craftiness, all the strength, all the nautical skills because the gods intend him to find his way home in the Odyssey. And then Scripture comes along with these incredible stories of the underdog, right? David and Goliath is the most incredible example where David definitely should lose. He's weaker, more poorly armed, has the weaker armor, but God intervenes on the side of David and carries the day. We have that story with Gideon. Gideon describes himself as the least of the least, right? And then God sends away most of Gideon's army and says, I've got this. Gideon and his 300 men are huge underdogs, but in fact, God shows his strength through our weakness. And this is revolutionary. It doesn't fit the ancient mind. It doesn't fit the Iliad. It doesn't fit the Odyssey. It doesn't fit the Aeneid. It just doesn't fit with the Roman and Greek mindset. Nonetheless, when we are weak, God is strong. God manifests himself through that. And so you're getting this strange mixture in Beowulf. This is not the story of a straight underdog triumphing. It's not. Beowulf is strong. He is a good fighter. He does have a great deal of courage, but he's also not the stereotypical braggart that Achilles is. He's not trusting in his own right arm. And so as Christian readers, I think you should look for that as well in Beowulf. Pay attention to the character of the man. Is he strong? Yes. Is he heroic? Yes. But he also knows that the battle belongs to the Lord. And he's also considered in some ways too understated to really play the role of hero, but he does. And this is Christianity beginning to realize that the underdog can win by the power of the Lord. Well, those are things I wish I knew before I started teaching Beowulf. Please join us for other segments, for other books when you're ready to tackle those. Thank you for your time.